Thank you for joining us for CBN NewsWatch AM. From Graham ahead today. Get ready for higher interest rates and concerns about a recession. The Federal Reserve once again hiking rates to fight rising prices.
Colleagues and I are strongly committed to bringing inflation back down, and we're moving expeditiously to do so.
But is the country facing a recession? We'll talk to CBN News financial editor Drew Parkhill. Former President Donald Trump and his former Vice President Mike Pence, running mates in the past but rivals for the White House in 2024? A college pre-law student denied a chance for a seat on the university student government Supreme Court.
We have Mya Little, who is a student at the University of Houston, who was vying for a spot on her student Supreme Court, and leftist students barred her that opportunity simply because she quoted the Bible in her opening speech.
We'll hear what happened in this case involving religious speech and using technology and data to try to stop crime before it happens.
But it's incredibly telling because crime is historical and it can be cyclical. And if it's happening year over year at the same time, it allows us to develop strategies and try to impact it.
We'll look at how this tool could be the future of police work. Those stories and more today on CBN NewsWatch.
This is CBN NewsWatch.
We begin with the Federal Reserve hiking interest rates again, hoping to curb inflation and strengthen the economy, while its chair denies the U.S. is in a recession. Heather Sells has more on the latest move to help consumers and American business.
Inflation right now is 9%, the highest level in 40 years. It's why the Federal Reserve has hiked its key interest rate again by 3/4 of a point.
Restoring price stability is just something that we have to do. There isn't an option to fail to do that.
The interest rate hike means Americans will pay more for mortgages, car loans, credit card debt, and other kinds of borrowing. The Fed hopes that in response, consumers will spend less and tamp down inflation.
Well, for the average American, if it has an impact on bringing down the rate of inflation, that'll be positive, because right now Americans are spending a lot more of their disposable income on energy, food, rent.
Cooling off inflation would strengthen the economy and ease fears, which Powell sought to address on Wednesday as he repeatedly denied that the U.S. is in a recession.
I do not think the U.S. is currently in a recession. And the reason is there are just too many areas of the economy that are performing, too well.
Powell cited the low unemployment rate, strong wages, and gas prices on the decline. Also the kind of talking points the White House is asserting with midterm elections in mind.
The reduction in gas prices that you've seen over the last couple of weeks is providing some measure of breathing room. Not enough, but some measure of breathing room.
Wednesday's move marks the Fed's fourth rate hike this year, and it came amid signs of an already slowing economy. One sign, Walmart cut its profit outlook, saying customers are spending less. Today, the Biden administration is claiming a win for its economic agenda after Senator Joe Manchin agreed to new $739 billion legislation that includes spending on energy and climate change initiatives, as well as plans to try to cut prescription drug prices and health care costs. It claims the bill also contains deficit reduction through a 15% corporate minimum tax. Heather Sells, CBN News.
Our CBN News financial editor, Drew Parkhill, Drew Money, is here with us right now to talk more about this. Now, some weeks ago, you expected gas prices to come down. What about inflation? Will it come down too?
Just so you all know out there, Ephraim is the one who gave me that.
Yes, indeed.
Yes, inflation will come down. I don't know how much it's going to come down, but the same information indicated that gas prices would come down. You could see the price of oil coming down, so that meant gas would come down. But there are some leading indicators for consumer prices, and they're showing that inflation is likely to peak out and start to drop off. Now, how much we don't know, and how long it's going to take, we don't know. But definitely the corner is going to be turned. So the pressure is going to ease up, not necessarily right away, but it is going to ease up.
Will the Democratic bill really help bring prices down?
Not really.
No.
To the extent that it'll have any impact on inflation, if it does, that would be sometime down the road. So the fact that they're even calling it inflation reduction shows that they know how much political trouble they're in, which they deserve to be in. But no, it's not going to have any real impact or any consequence right now.
No, we're hearing the Biden administration saying we're not in a recession. Are we facing a recession?
At minimum, a slowdown. As you mentioned yesterday, 58% of the country believes we're already in a recession. So that's what really counts is consumer behavior, corporate behavior, and so forth. Yeah, there's a realistic chance. We'll get official data later, and the Biden administration is trying to deny it and to change. They're actually technically correct on the definition, but if you have 2 quarters, they're correct in saying that it's not just 2 quarters of a shrinking economy. That's true, but if you do have 2 quarters where the economy shrinks, that is a recession, whether it's a technical definition or not. And people believe it. There's a lot of mitigating factors, but people believe that it's a recession right now.
How are you feeling for the longer run? Are you optimistic?
I'm still extremely optimistic. Once we get through this, the stock market, the Dow, which is about 32,000 now, is going to explode. It's going over 100,000 within 10 years.
All right, Drew Parkhill, thank you so much for your insight. Always appreciate it. I want to turn now to former President Donald Trump and his Vice President Mike Pence. The former running mates now look more like rivals. While the race to challenge President Biden for the White House is more than 2 years away, we're getting a sense of what the GOP field might look like, with Trump and Pence signaling they're in. CBN's Matt Galko joins us now with the story.
A former president and his vice president back in the district giving dueling speeches and largely avoiding each other. That was the story of Donald Trump and Mike Pence in Washington, D.C. this week.
I'm a Christian, a conservative, and a Republican, in that order.
Mike Pence chose to stake his position in front of younger conservatives at the Young America's Foundation conference. The former vice president touted multiple Trump-Pence administration accomplishments, like low unemployment, American trade, and border security. But he also made a point of differentiation with his former boss by frequently mentioning the future and road ahead for his party rather than dwelling on the past. Pence barely touched on January 6th and a highly publicized split with Donald Trump, although a student brought the subject front and center with a pointed question after the speech.
So I don't know that our movement is that divided. I don't know that the president and I differ on issues. But we may differ on focus. I truly do believe that elections are about the future.
Later in the day, and less than a mile away, the former president took his turn at the America First Policy Institute Summit. Trump talked about a bleak America under the dark cloud of growing violence nationwide.
Our country is in a condition on crime that we've never seen before.
Then he went into familiar claims about the 2020 election, while hinting at another run for the White House.
If I renounced my beliefs, if I agreed to stay silent, if I stayed at home and just took it easy, the persecution of Donald Trump would stop immediately. It would stop. But that's not what I will do. I can't do that. A much simpler life. Have to save our country.
The clear divide between Trump and Pence and who should vie for the White House in 2024 is the so-called elephant in the room. But many Republicans are not yet ready to commit to a candidate.
I think it'd be good to have a wide variety of different voices and really lay out what their plans are for the future. It's not enough to just say, this is what we've done in the past.
There's always jockeying for leadership, for thought leadership. And that's what we're so encouraged by, is to see these office holders, some former office holders, stepping forward with a positive agenda to address the economic problems that we have and the cultural problems.
While the deciding factor could end up being one of the future versus the past, analysts believe it's still Trump's party.
For voters who Trump is their guy and they like him, Pence is essentially a traitor because of January 6th and what he did or did not do on that day. I think it's difficult for Pence to get there.
Now it's likely we'll continue to hear from both men, especially leading up to the midterm elections, where they seemingly agree on at least one thing: Republican control of Congress after November. Matt Galko, CBN News.
Coming up, she was a Christian candidate for Student Government Supreme Court at the University of Houston, but then she was accused of religious bias. The reason? She quoted a Bible verse in a speech. We're going to hear her story. When we come back, stay with us. A Christian candidate for the Student Government Supreme Court at the University of Houston recently learned she had best keep her faith-inspired views to herself. Students accused the pre-law student of religious bias and denied her a seat on the court because she quoted a Bible verse during a speech. Appearing on this week's episode of the Global Lane, campus reform reporter Alexa Schwerha explains what happened to the University of Houston student Mya Little.
This is terrible news for the First Amendment and particularly for freedom of religion. We have Mya Little, who is a student at the University of Houston, who was vying for a spot on her student Supreme Court, and leftist students barred her that opportunity simply because she quoted the Bible in her opening speech. But what these leftist students actually fail to realize is that this nation is founded on Judeo-Christian values, and it's Judeo-Christian values that make up our government and make up our laws. It is the foundation of our judicial system. In America, one of our national mottos is "In God We Trust." And in the Capitol, Moses is depicted as a lawgiver. So it's very hypocritical for these students who are interested in pursuing law and pursuing government to at the same time remove Little from that opportunity simply because of her religious beliefs.
And is she a pre-law student? And do you know what she said? What did she quote from the Bible? Do we know?
So Little quoted Isaiah 11, but regardless of the quote, it doesn't matter because that is her constitutionally protected speech. If Little wants to open her speech with the Bible and express her faith, then all the more to her. She has that constitutionally protected right. And for students who, again, are interested in pursuing law and pursuing government, to try to take that right away from her is abhorrent. But here at the Leadership Institute's Campus Reform, this isn't the first time that we have seen Christian students discriminated because of their religious beliefs. Just last November at Auburn University, a student was barred from serving as Chief Justice of his student Supreme Court because he was a devout Christian. And it took a campus reform report for the student to even go back and serve as an Associate Justice. But it shouldn't take media pressure for liberal students to toss away their overt anti-Christian bias and appoint students to serve their campus who are interested and have a passion for law, justice, and order.
What did the University of Houston administration say about this? Anything? Did they respond at all?
Well, I can tell you what they should be doing about it, and they should be standing up and protecting Little's freedom of speech. They should be standing up and defending her First Amendment rights. College campuses and university administrators have a responsibility to protect the rights of their students, and by staying silent on this issue, the University of Houston is just tossing Little's rights out the door. So they should be hearing more about this case. They should be looking into and investigating what exactly happened and ensure that her speech is protected on campus.
And it wasn't just there in Houston. University of Michigan head football coach Jim Harbaugh attended a pro-life event recently in Plymouth, Michigan. This was off campus. He urged women to have courage to let the unborn be born. And wow, did that ever create a firestorm on social media? And some students were so outraged they wanted Harbaugh fired. Your thoughts on that one?
Unfortunately, that's where we are as a society nowadays, where if someone has the courage to stand up and defend the unborn, defend the right to life, they're canceled by today's modern society. And one thing we always say here at the Leadership Institute's Campus Reform is that what happens on a college campus eventually will become mainstream in society. So it's unsurprising that this is the behavior we are seeing from these students, and that's the reaction they're having to the football coach standing up and having pro-life beliefs. This is an attack on freedom of religion, and it's an attack on freedom of speech, and we have to be more adamant about teaching respect for the First Amendment, so we recognize that we all have it. We all have the right to say what we deeply feel, what we deeply believe. This should be something that is taught and pushed on a college campus so that when they do graduate and go out into society, we're able to return to having civil conversations about hard topics.
And it seems like this anti-faith attitude has intensified since the Supreme Court's Dobbs decision. Now only pro-abortionists are allowed on campus. Seems like that. Our universities were once supposed to be great institutions where various opinions were welcomed, where issues were debated, critical thinking was encouraged. Why is this happening now, Alexa?
Well, it's because no one has stood up and told these students no and challenged their wrong ideas. Just recently, I went down to Georgetown here in our nation's capital, and I was speaking to students about the Constitution and how exactly it applies to abortion. As we know, in Dobbs, the Supreme Court ruled that there is no constitutional right to an abortion. But the students that I talked to were adamant that the court had made the wrong decision. So what I really took away from these conversations is that these pro-abortion radicals aren't interested in what the Constitution actually says. They're interested in interpreting it so they can continue to push their radical notions. This is what we're up against. This is what these students believe, and it is all across the country on America's college campuses. We have to get back to a spot where we can have civil conversations that are based in truth, objectivity, and fact.
Okay, something for parents to keep in mind as they prepare to send their students, their children, off to college this fall. Alexa Schwerha, campus reform reporter. Good talking with you again, Alexa. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
Also on tonight's episode of The Global Lane, the truth about climate change and politics. And the Federal Reserve raises interest rates 0.75%. Is it too little too late to cool inflation? We'll explore the question. You can also see more on those stories and much more on The Global Lane. It begins at 8:30 Eastern. You can find it on the CBN News Channel or on the CBN News app. Still ahead, the data-driven way to stop crime before it happens. In one city, it's already led to a 27% reduction in gun violence. Find out how police are using technology to make the streets safer right after this. Predicting crime, violent crime, before it breaks out. That is what police departments are now doing with science-driven data to forecast when and where the next crime wave could take place. It is called crime mapping. And in one city, it's credited for a 27% reduction in the number of shooting victims. CBN's Brody Carter reports on how this tool could be the future of policing.
I'm here in Portsmouth, Virginia, which, as you can see, has beautiful waterfront views. It overlooks one of the oldest naval shipyards in the United States. It also has one of the highest murder rates throughout the nation, higher than Chicago and Washington, D.C. So how do smaller communities that have limited resources fight rising crime rates?
Every day we have gun violence and shooting somewhere and somebody's trying to take someone's life.
The U.S. murder rate started surging during the COVID pandemic and sits at its highest level in nearly 2 decades.
Actually, it hits home for me. My father was killed when I was 2 years old due to gun violence. So I was raised by women, and I'm very passionate about gun violence and trying to eradicate this senseless crime.
Reverend Barry R. Randall, also known as the People's Pastor here, leads Sunday service at the All People Cultural Life Church. The locals lovingly call the city P-Town. However, the charm is overshadowed by its reputation for violence. Murder in the city has become such a problem, the state is giving it $500,000 to try and stop it. The question is, how do they plan to use it?
We've been asked a lot of questions about what is our strategy, what are we going to do, and how are we going to address crime. Point blank, I'm not going to say that. When you're playing football, you don't tell the other team your next move.
It's a cryptic approach to crime that didn't last long. After serving the city only 10 months, former Chief of Police Renato Prince was fired shortly after the 4th of July for a, quote, breach of trust. Different departments have different strategies. Not 20 miles away in Virginia Beach, Chief Paul Newdigate believes his department has a secret weapon to stop rising crime and gun violence: data.
Instead of just throwing money at officers, maybe that money should go to help them build up an analytical services unit, help them develop their analytical product so the officers that they do have can be extremely focused in their efforts.
That's why the department is reinvesting in a law enforcement tool that's been around some 20 years, called crime mapping. It uses historical data to build a heat map of when and where crimes might happen in the future. Think of a farmer's almanac for crime prevention, where police are able to forecast crime before it even happens.
But it's incredibly telling because crime is historical and it can be cyclical. And if it's happening year over year at the same time, it allows us to develop strategies and try to impact it.
Some of the data is made public in the weekly analysis for Virginia Beach Engagement and Strategies, or WAVES. While there are concerns that data could be biased towards people of color, Chief Newdigate attributes crime mapping to this year's 27% reduction in the number of shooting victims.
It's what the community is telling me. It's who is a victim of the community. And are there disparities? Absolutely. We know that there are disparities in that data. A large amount of our victims of violent crime are minorities.
Another tool Virginia Beach Police uses hides on the city's rooftops. It's called ShotSpotter. Technology alerting police precisely to the location where gunshots are fired.
I would say it probably has about a 95% success rate. It leads to a confirmed activation. That 95% of the time, we are responding there and we're finding either shell casings, sometimes we're making an arrest, or we're finding witnesses that said, yeah, I saw this and here was some gunfire.
While both crime mapping and ShotSpotter have been around for years, not all departments take advantage of those resources. Back in the city of Portsmouth, the local hospital is footing the city's bill to purchase ShotSpotter, a signal of hope for its citizens who are still desperate to find an answer to the violence.
What people need to know about Portsmouth, that Portsmouth has potential, but we have to get the right people in office. Voting is very positive.
Brody Carter, CBN News.
Coming up, a remarkable rescue of a drowning teenager with a big assist by a drone. We're going to have that story for you when we come back. Stay with us. From military strikes to package deliveries, drones are increasingly becoming a part of everyday life around the world, sometimes serving as eyes in the sky. And that watchful gaze recently came in handy, helping to save the life at a beach. A 14-year-old teen in Spain was seconds away from drowning when an unmanned drone was deployed into action, dropping a life jacket into the turbulent waters. The jacket kept the boy afloat until lifeguards arrived, pulling him into a boat and safely to shore. Beautiful. Time now for your Thursday Thankful. I trust you will join me in this declaration of gratitude. God, you are good. Even when my situation is not, you are good, and your mercy, it endures forever. With that declaration, I pray you will make this a thankful Thursday. And I encourage you to walk in gratitude. It will make for a greater day and even a greater life. That is a wrap for this edition of CBN NewsWatch. Remember, you can always find more of our news programs on the CBN News Channel. You can find them there at any time, as well as online at cbnnews.com. We'd love to know what you think about the stories you've seen here today. You can email us at the address right there on your screen, newswatch@cbn.com. And of course, you can also reach out and touch us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We certainly would love to hear from you. Again, make today a thankful Thursday and join us right back here, same time tomorrow. Goodbye, everybody, and God bless.